Stop wasting time trawling through thousands of fonts because these 6 typefaces might be all you need as a web designer, and they're free and they're slightly lesser known. There's nothing here from the top 50 on Google Fonts. As well as giving you some design tips along the way, I'm going to show you live website examples of each font in use. I'll say a little bit more about why we're doing this as we go, but let's get straight into it with our first selection. BDO Grotesk, which is hosted on Uncut, because everybody needs a grotesque sans in their tool bag, or let's say a Helvetica style sans serif. This is going to be a real workhorse for you, and a lot of people use Inter. Let's find something a little bit different, a little bit more personality to this, and we use this actually on the Bark site, which, as well as being hilarious, is actually the site that you can learn how to build in the advanced module on our Framer course. And this is a great example of how this font just works really hard throughout this whole. It's suitable for headlines here. It's also suitable for the body copy we see in these sections of paragraphs, and it really just gives that modernist style that you'll get from Helvetica, Universe and similar grotesques, but it just has a little bit of personality, a little bit of separation from that norm. And this real style is timeless. This can work for pretty much any brand, any kind of website, and you need a grotesque sans like this in your selection. So I think that this website really illustrates that BDO Grotesk is a great option for that. Let's jump over to a geometric sans. So these are the type of fonts that are more based on geometric forms. So you can see here that O's here is quite circular. So if you wanted something, a bit like Futura, you might try something like Outfit. We can see it here on this website. It's not these main headlines here, but actually if we use our little extension here in Google, these paragraphs here are where we can see Outfit, and it does actually work in body copy in this sort of way. You wouldn't always use a geometric in that place. Sometimes a humanist sans or a grotesque would be more legible. It really is a nice choice here. It has that sort of feel that is quite friendly, a bit less austere, a bit less cold and harsh, and it just gives a little bit of that friendliness while still remaining something that is timeless and something that looks professional at the same time. And Outfit is a good choice for that. You see it also on this website. Again, it's used for the body copy sections. It contrasts with these more narrower, condensed headlines, and it definitely, a good sort of Futura type alternative. And it's interesting when you try and just get down to like 6 fonts or fonts in those key categories, and this sort of idea kind of comes from Massimo Vignelli. He talks about it in this book, the Vignelli collection. He has this poster where there are these basic typefaces and this exhibition that he hosted to just display them and actually illustrate that you can do so much with just a few key typefaces, and actually they can lend themselves to lots of different things if in essence they are really solid fundamental typefaces. And Ran actually made a video about this, and this video is kind of the alternative to that, where we go beyond the Helvetica and Garamond and Bodoni and Times and the well-known old faces and look at some new ones and some fresh ones. So next I want to bring in a serif, and this is Instrument Serif. We can see here is a very condensed serif font that really works well for display. On Google Fonts here we only have the regular upright and then the regular italic, and this was originally created for this creative agency called Instrument, with a really nice website that's worth checking out. And you can see how well this works here, in a long sentence headline, but it really looks of the moment. That whole sort of 1980s advertising look has come back in, and just paired here with something timeless like this sans that they have for the button here, it really works well. And it can work at all different sorts of sizes. Here they have it huge, the serif, and then with this narrow sans next to it. And then I also found it on this website for a hotel in Paris, And again, this gives it a very sort of formal setting. When you have things that are center aligned, lots of negative space around it, just these short headlines, it gives it this formality which is sort of associated with luxury. If you imagine you were invited to a gala dinner, a ball or something like that, you have that sort of impression here, and it works well for these short sentences. And it's fine to center a line and your text, you know, with short sentences. If it's super long, I prefer to see, you know, it left aligned, but this works well. And then they have brought in a left alignment here when the sentences get a little bit longer. But here, I think it works really well as a headline. I'm not sure about pairing it both ways. The weights start to look a bit strange, so maybe they could have just used a sans serif here in the main body copy. But overall, this is very, very elegant and a really cool choice to add to your selections. We also need monospace fonts. Space Mono is a great option. This has been designed by Colophon Foundry, who are a legit type foundry, and sometimes on Google Fonts and other places, type foundries will share certain fonts which usually would cost a lot of money, but this can be a promotional thing for them. They're getting a shout out right now. And let people find their links and get into it. But this is a really nice monospace font which has great proportions, and it also has a few unique little things, like if you look at the G here, how it has this horizontal, it's quite unusual. These little elements make it stand out, and you see this used a lot. I mean, 55.6 million it's been served. Not as many as some of the top of Google, but you know, it's still on a lot of websites. Here, like on Help Scout, you know, a major website, you know, quite a sizable tech company. See, they're not using it in these main areas, but you can see it just here. We can see that monospace font, and monospace fonts are great for captions. And they're great for these little standouts. They're good for, you see here, it's just used for the person's title. And so just having that little contrast between the other fonts they're using this display font, there's a serif here, there's a sans serif for the main body copy, but then it just allows these little headlines to just have their own, or their own captions for these sections, to be a little bit recessive, but also just stand out without overwhelming the hierarchy. On this site for wine, natural wine, you can see they've actually used a monospace font as a headline font, and this makes a really handsome display font. It's also used here in the titles for these sections, but where they make it pretty huge here where it says natural wine, I think that's really interesting, because the characteristics of a monospace font that you might associate with code, they really come to the fore. All the little details. Look at the little ink traps here, like on the N. It really makes it look sort of quirky and unique looking, because you wouldn't usually have a W that's as wide as a lowercase I. So these little things make it kind of a quirky display font. So that's one of my favorite things to do, use monospace fonts but as big headlines. It's also on this e-commerce site here for Black Bean Grocery, and when you use monospace all the way through, it gives it a real kind of raw utilitarian feel. It feels very kind of ground up and a lot less polished and a lot less corporate, and kind of very young and scrappy and functional. It's kind of a very aesthetic choice to give it that sort of hard-working kind of feel. So that definitely lends itself to this sort of aesthetic here, and so that's really another option that you can sort of bring in. And you also learn some keys to double happiness, like respecting your elders, people with grey hair like myself. Cooper Hewitt, the museum in New York, which is well worth visiting, by the way, if you're ever over there in Manhattan, they commissioned their own typeface many years ago. Yeah, as you see, it was originally by Pentagram, and then they've taken it on, and they've actually made this freely available on their website. You can download the typeface right here, and their whole identity is based on this. It's a very type-led identity. You can see the sort of typographic layout of the navigation here. If we go to maybe like an about page, and you can just see that they've got all these different weights for the font, and it really works well in pairs. So we've got this heavier weight here for the headlines, and then this regular weight, nicely typeset that you would expect from a design museum, but just with this left alignment, a really good measure here, the line length, and just makes it easy to read. But still, this is a font which is, because it's more condensed and because it's got sort of those geometric qualities, it feels a little bit more friendly and a little bit more of the time than perhaps, you know, a traditional Grotesk would be. If this was something like Universe, it would be a lot colder, whereas this gives itself, you know, a different sort of face on it. So it's definitely an interesting one to use. And the way they use it with the all caps in the heavier weight, it gives that sort of newsprint headline sort of feel, which is, you know, a technique you could try out for yourself. Hedvig is actually a Swedish insurance company, and both this unusual serif here, you can see these really interesting little features, this little arm on top of the G that is, you know, very straight. They're usually quite curly and curved. But it has a lot of classic features as well of a serif, like a Georgia or something like that. And this works really nicely paired with their sans, which is also available on Google. Now, but only the regular uprights are available for both the serif and the sans on Google. But even just with those, as we'll see in a minute, you can do a lot. They actually have on the Type Foundry's website the whole page about this, and I believe you can get like other versions and perhaps weights and things like that here, but it's a really nice specimen here where you can see how this can be, again, very kind of timeless sort of look. There's kind of like an Apple-like thing to it, although Apple don't really use serifs so much anymore, but really letting the imagery come through and just with black and white. So this specimen's worth a look at, but also the website for the actual corporation that's behind this, and they've done this whole combination of the serif and the sans. So the serif here for the headline, and as you go through the site, again, now we've got a completely different thing. At the top, we're maybe thinking this is kind of like any sort of tech company and kind of clean, and we've got the device. But as we go in here, we have this very natural kind of point of view photography, like fly on the wall, reportage kind of style. And this still works, as we said, if you use this just sort of a classic sans serif, it just has a timeless feel and kind of lends itself to anything. So it feels very neutral here on this site and pairs nicely next to this photography. But then this type just has enough little personality and little modern tweaks to just take it away from a Baskerville or a Garamond or a Plantin, or sort of fonts that where we share some similar characteristics. And again, good typesetting is what makes this really work. There's good negative space around, sensible alignment, good font sizes, a nice sort of sequencing of the different layouts as we move through the site. And they've got this sort of classic combination of a sans and a serif together, so you could use these two in one site, just as these guys have done here. Something for everyone here. So am I going to stop buying fonts? No, there's no chance of that. Don't forget to grab my free Google Fonts guide from the link in the description. And if you know an amazing free font that works well on the web, name it in the comments so that everyone can enjoy. Until next time, happy designing.